When you look at, you know, the emerging forces in society that are tearing it apart, what are the biggest ones to you in your mind?
Well, certainly ideological possession plays a huge role. And I suppose to some degree that's probably misplaced spirituality. It's something like that. And so I've always been struck by Nietzsche and Dostoevsky's analysis of the pathology of the West, that we're still suffering the cataclysmic consequences of losing our religious grounding. You need some conceptual scheme at the highest level of philosophical generalization. You need some.
And here we go with the religious fundamentalism and the full, really where it all leads back to, and where a lot of it comes back to, is he fundamentally hates the fact that society has become so secularized that as there have been these challenges to religion and the idea of, not necessarily gods, because there are still plenty of people who believe in deities but don't believe in the institutions and these fundamental hierarchies. Well, so much of our society in turn has been influenced by them: education, business, different elements of culture, and expression and everything. And so as a result of those challenges being made, especially during the time of enlightenment, when there were a lot of when there was a huge leap forward in technology, in sciences, in philosophy, in culture, and the way that people were able to organize and interact with one another, it set a whole new precedent that we are still living in. And he is one of the people who is deep down really resentful of that. And that's why to him everything has to come back down to a fundamental truth of religion, because for him, without religion there is no moral foundation, there is no framework. Everything just becomes a mess, in spite of the fact that there's plenty of examples of people living secularized lives and being just as productive, happy, fulfilled, and cohesive, and sometimes even more so in places that have less religion or that are more secularized.
Some way of answering what is good and what is evil, and some way of answering what's the purpose of my life, and maybe what's the purpose of existence. And at that level of analysis, the only answers are religious. Now, you can debate the rational acceptability of those answers, but that doesn't matter. I'm talking about...
It doesn't matter? Then what are we talking about here? If you want to say that, like, oh, you cannot, how else could you understand not to murder, not to rape, not to steal? There are plenty of secular arguments for that. Well, first of all, there's reputation. Even if you're just cynical and you really don't care about the harm that you're doing to others, you don't want to be known as the person who is committing all these acts, because they're usually, for the most part, they're seen as extremely negative behaviors, and you will be killed or I almost say killed or executed, the same thing, or you will be exiled or jailed or killed or left for dead. Those are perfectly rational arguments, but also you have to figure, oh, why wouldn't I want to do these things? Because you also never know who is going to be in power tomorrow. And so you maybe inflict a lot of pain thinking that, oh, nothing is going to happen to you, or that this, you never know when who is going to have the upper hand in this situation. And you could find yourself in a place where you are the would-be victim, and you would be grateful for the empathy and for the sympathy that comes from another person. You don't have to believe in an afterlife for that. You don't have to believe in any sort of religious text for that, or even have a sense of spirituality. But for him, they are inherently intertwined, and they can't be separated, because, again, he is a dogmatic person. He can only think in this very narrow framework.
The level of analysis problem, right, essentially. If you're talking about such things, you're in the religious domain. Well, intact cultures, let's say, or traditional cultures, have a structure of ritual and myth and dance and music and art and story that frames that uppermost domain of conceptualization, and people live within that. When it's fragmented and shattered, as ours has been, people turn to substitutes, and those substitutes have all too frequently been, well, either a cataclysmic loss of faith in existence itself, which is a nihilism that has terrible psychological and social consequences, or the elevation of an ideological position to the status of a religious belief. And right, that's not good. And And so everything in its proper place, you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's. And, the rationalist objector will say, well, there's nothing that's God's. And I would respond to that by saying, be careful what you presume.
Right.
Because something has to act there. Something has to exist there. And you fall into a religious story. So if with the critique you laid out, for example, of social institutions, you say, well, they tend towards corruption. And maybe they're so corrupt that only a fool would have faith in them. And that's a powerful argument. But it's essentially a religious argument. What it does is it takes the problem of evil. So it assumes that there's evil, which is the corruption and the power. Maybe you don't use the term evil, but it doesn't matter. It's still what you're referring to. And then it places it in social institutions. It says the problem of evil is located in the social institution. Well, that's a religious claim. It's also a faulty religious claim, and it'll twist you up and bend you around because it's incomplete.
How is it incomplete? How is it incomplete? There's a great example. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and pull this one up. So he just said that these social institutions leave you with a sense of, what did he say? He said they make you incomplete. Let's go back and just see what he said.
A religious argument. What it does is it takes the problem of evil. So it assumes that there's evil, which is the corruption and the power. Maybe you don't use the term evil, but it doesn't matter. It's still what you're referring to. And then it places it in social institutions. It says the problem of evil is located in the social institution. Well, that's a religious claim. It's also a faulty religious claim, and it'll twist you up and bend you around because it's incomplete.
And who is it for him to say who is incomplete in their religious or irreligious beliefs? And what is he to say which beliefs are the correct ones to have and which ones aren't? This dude's full of malarkey. He's just finding any way to try to justify his own narrow, esoteric, and antiquated views. And here's the other great thing about what he's saying is that he's all like, oh, well, left, they want to make it all about the institutions and everything. No, we recognize that institutions have the ability. We have the ability to use institutions in order to make some grand sweeping changes top down in society. Which one did he say? He's not saying a particular religion. But the thing is, what he's alluding to specifically is what they like to call Judeo-Christian beliefs, or really just Western, this mythos of Western civilization. No, not religion in and of itself. He's speaking specifically about Christianity, about what they refer to as Judeo-Christian beliefs, which is this hodgepodge. We're not assuming anything. This is from the track record of him speaking on these issues before, and also stuff that he said that he's going to continue to say in this podcast. He doesn't just outright say, oh, I am a Christian man, or I am a, follower in this stuff. But it's in all the stuff that he's alluding. He's full on with the patriarchy. He's full on with specific hierarchies. He doesn't like so much, even though he frames himself as being an intellectual, he really doesn't like a lot of intellectualism, especially when it's attached to secular means. So we're not assuming anything. And as a matter of fact, for a quick example of how he gets this whole thing wrong in reference to, we just look at institutions as being, as we just look at institutions as just being there and evil, and that's a faulty idea. No, it's not a faulty idea, because those are actually great ways of being able to implement sweeping changes in society, as will be demonstrated here by the comedian Jim Jeffries.
Making people bake a cake for a gay wedding.
Making them do it?
Yeah.
I don't think that's a very good idea.
But making people bake a cake for a gay wedding.
Making them do it?
Yeah.
I don't think that's a very good idea.
But here's the argument. So should they be able to deny making a cake for a black couple if they don't like black people?
Allowed to? Probably. That doesn't mean it's right.
Okay, so then we had the civil rights movement,
Yep.
where they said black people, you had to serve them in your restaurants and
Yep.
stuff like that, and it did work, and it did make our society better, but would
Yep.
you argue that that still wasn't right?
No, that was right.
Why is that different to now if you didn't want to make a cake for black people?
Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not different.
Yeah.
Maybe I was wrong about that.
Simple as that. We're not assuming anything. He was, for in that short amount of time, he went from no, I don't think you should have to make a cake, for gay people, which is effectively an argument about, saying, should we use our institutions? He mentioned Judeo-Christians. No, he didn't. But again, it's not about explicitly what he's saying here. It's about, again, what he said in other platforms and other interviews, and also what he's alluding to here. Because Jordan Peterson, he's not like a Buddhist. He's not even a Catholic. But in all the beliefs that he espouses, what he overwhelmingly ends up referring to is, again, this hodgepodge. They like to throw around the term, the Judeo-Christian is less of something that will be somebody will call themselves, and more so refers to a hodgepodge of different beliefs and philosophies that they think are pertaining specifically to their idea of Western civilization, because they tend to associate Judaism and Christianity with being explicitly about cultural and social norms attributed to Western civilization. But no, he's not mentioning that. He's not going to explicitly mention that. But who can claim that what he is alluding to? I mean, this is getting boring. Twitch 69, LOL 420. I mean, it's obvious you're just bullshitting. But the thing is, I get it that you're here just to waste space and everything, which is whatever. So I'm going to just ignore you and keep on going on with the video. If you wanted to know more about this, then you could, but you're clearly not interested in that. So I'm moving on.
And I tried to detail that to a large degree in chapter 11 when I talked about, because you can find malevolence in your own soul. You can find malevolence in other individuals. You can find it in the social order. And you can find something that looks like malevolence or certainly feels like it in the natural world.
Right.
And if you only focus on one of those, then, well, it's very convenient for you.
Damn it.
I mean, so one of the things I always wonder, for example, if you locate evil in the social world, let's say in the institutional world, in the patriarchal tyranny, well, then you found an enemy, right? And then you found a target for all of your unexamined spite and resentment and cruelty and homicidal tendencies, all of that. It's very dangerous. And this more sophisticated observers, and I think you can make this case merely as a consequence of observing literature, more sophisticated observers place the battle between good and evil inside the human soul. And then it manifests itself in social institutions as well, but that's not the primary locale of the divine battle.
Right.
And
Christopher Hitchens, the late, great, writer, had argued, in a polemic, God is not great, that religion should be replaced by the canon of literature, that theology should be thrown away and replaced with literature, that all of our great lessons that we need to know are in literature. Do you find fault with that?
Well, the deepest literature is religious.
Okay.
I mean, that's what Hitchens didn't realize, is that if you took 100 great books and sifted them so that you derived one greatest book from it, then you'd have a religious text.
Right.
No. Most of our stories do not have to do, even though they might be inspired by religion, they are not have to do with religious beliefs. Literature, depending on which branch of literature, which time period, talks about, relationships, talks about, power struggles, talks about, the anxieties of growing up and, noticing changes within yourself and within, outside of yourself. It could just be about documenting, world-changing events, monumental events. This boiling down of everything of importance to being what he cherishes most, and yet framing it as being what everybody is actually alluding to. Like he ascribed like you heard him, is that he ascribed to Hitchens, who was a very well spoken and outspoken atheist and non-believer, and had great arguments for secularism and against religion. He is ascribing to him that, oh, he actually was religious and he just didn't understand the truth of what he was getting at. No, he is trying to basically force his own beliefs and grift them and what's the term I'm trying to look? He's trying to not grift but graft the beliefs of somebody else, and because they're not around to defend themselves, they say that no, they're actually reinforcing my beliefs. They're actually reinforcing things I say instead of just saying that this is what I want to see within them. He is framing them as being some general truth about human existence. Yeah, this is deceit. This is manipulation. This is, he's really putting his psychology skills to use here, but it's mixed in with his own dogma and his own preferences, and he's so blinded by his need to see things in this way, or maybe he does recognize this, but this is just he's just been really successful in selling this. So why stop now? But you cannot ascribe, saying your own beliefs and say that, well, since there are some things which you're alluding to which fall in line with my beliefs, instead of just recognizing those may be overlapping values that come from two different, paths towards reaching the same goal, I'm going to say that actually we have the same core beliefs and you just don't recognize what the truth is. That's religious fundamentalism. That's dogma.
And it would deal with these high order concerns that we just described. And some of that can't be done rationally, which is partly why Hitchens would locate it in literature. But it's not just literature. It's also located and expressed in architecture. A cathedral says something about the structure of being. Now, what it says, you can't exactly say. That's why there's a cathedral instead of a description of a cathedral.
Right.
It's the same with music and perhaps particularly religious music, but secular music is religious music. It's just been secularized. It still has the same impact and the same message.
But a lot of the religions seem to be less relevant to people because not all of their lessons and morals, which many of them are great, but a lot of them, the big three, let's take, which you have Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Christianity went through a pretty serious reformation. Judaism is a small religion in terms of the numbers of people. Islam is potentially going through a reformation now in certain countries and other, it's politically. So when people look at these religions and we say the answers are to be found there, there's sort of a deep skepticism amongst a lot of people who look at, when people were following these religions to the letter of the law and when they had an omnipresent, force in the political structure of society, it was often quite an oppressive place, whether it was, if you look at like the Catholic Inquisition or whether you look at, modern day Saudi Arabia, for example. So there's a skepticism about those belief systems being incredibly relevant now. And then you arrive at this place where people start believing in, that they're, an other kin on Tumblr or whatever nonsense that you've had to go up against for the last 4 years. So it's like, what can you create or what can we put in that? Because if people, for example, if you were raised a fundamentalist Christian and you don't feel for whatever reason that belief system suits you anymore, and you are out there and you are looking for belief and you are looking for meaning and you're not going to find it, and who knows why that belief system doesn't suit you? I don't know. It could be your identity, it doesn't work. It could be that your family and you had something. It could have been that the particular church you were in was abusive. I know many Catholics who've left the church because of the litany of abuses, right, that has happened. So what can we create, or how do we create some type of, and I'm not saying that we have to do it or it has to be a group project. I loathe groups, and I love your focus on the individual in that sense is what makes you unique and interesting in the individuals. George Carlin had a great quote. He goes, I hate people, I love individuals. It was something to that degree. But, I agree wholeheartedly that what you see on the left right now is a lot of people that are indoctrinating themselves into a new religion that is as oppressive, as unforgiving, and as detrimental as a lot of the tenets of old religion. But what can you do if you say, I don't want to be a part of that, but I also don't want to be a part of, sort of that, archaic superstitious kind of, belief system that you may
Well,
have
that's
grown up
that's what we're all trying to work out, isn't
Yeah.
it? Is what we should do. I mean, your comments about Hitchens are very interesting to me because I would say, in the main, I've taken his words seriously.
with. Right.
Is that I do believe that the truth of the biblical truth, for example, is a literary truth. It's not a scientific truth.
Right.
Science isn't about morality. It's about something else. Whatever the Bible is about, it's about morality. Now, you can debate the moral lessons in the Bible, but the Bible is an extraordinarily complicated book, so it's
Right.
not that clear exactly what the lessons are, let's say. But having said all that, I've adopted a psychological / literary approach to ethical truth. And I've learned a lot about Christianity, for example, as a consequence. So, and a lot of that was from reading Carl Jung, who wrote a lot of what he wrote in response to Nietzsche's
God is dead.
observation that religion was dead, that
Right.
God was dead. Yes, yes. And so Jung was influenced by Freud, but at least as much by Nietzsche. And he was trying to solve the problems that Nietzsche left. Well, you could, by definition, Christ is the perfect man. Okay, by definition.
Right.
Now you can debate his representation in Christianity.
How about we just debate if the man existed? How about we start with that before we go and start saying that, like, well, he was the best, he was the most perfect man that ever existed. Maybe as a literary device. But even then, that's disputable because it's like, what values are you actually most concerned with? Yeah, as a literary figure, yeah, Jesus Christ could be seen as a great man, but that was only one set of conditions in one's location. Or not one location, but it was a set of conditions in which he supposedly, existed. Every era, every time, every place in history, every country deserves its own kind of heroes. You get the hero you deserve, not the one in which you just fantasize about. You don't all get this one narrow prescription in which everybody is supposed to aspire to, and if you fall short of that, then I'm saying, oh well, fuck all that noise.
That isn't what I.
And to the one that was alluding to earlier, who I put on timeout, yeah, he's saying explicitly now Christianity, and he is saying specifically Protestantism because of the emphasis that he is putting on the figure of Jesus Christ.
mean. I mean, in some sense, I mean this.